I'm your host, Sheldon Bro, a fisherman's son turned banker, turned mortgage pro, turned fintech founder. Finance Village is a podcast that caters to both financial professionals and consumers, featuring conversations that challenge and engage experts right across the industry. And our show's ultimate goal is to enhance the financial literacy of consumers while providing financial professionals with the best resources to serve their clients effectively. It takes a village of experts to ensure the best care for our clients, and Finance Village is here to help build that village. This is brought to you by Castflex Media, a podcast production company. And if you want to start or have a podcast that you want to make better, Castflex has the flex you need to make it easy and awesome.
So welcome everyone to another episode of Finance Village. Today we're going to discuss finance industry origin stories. It's the perfect time to do it because I'm bringing in some new folks to co-host with me. So we don't just have myself leading the charge every podcast, bring in some really well-experienced financial advisors. I come from a mortgage advisor background, a day-to-day banking expert, a lot of lending, specialized lending, investment lending, and really have a really great cast of people today. I've got the two financial advisors, Nick and Simon, coming in as podcast permanent co-hosts, and Grace, who comes from a very, very important position. Any smart advisor knows that it's the most important, that they can't operate without them, an operations manager with Align Capital Partners. She's also IROC and insurance license, or your dual license, right?
Correct. Yes, I am.
And been in the industry about 5 years, has a passion for financial education. I met her through LinkedIn. We had a lunch and just the most wonderful conversation of all kinds of different things and our experiences within finance. And I love the background story that she's going to be able to share with us today, because it's one of my favorite background stories within finance. And it's a very similar one that I come from as well. Simon Wong, again, permanent co-host, many credentials behind his name. I won't list them all. I don't even know necessarily what they all are, though I'm going to get Simon to quickly tell us what all those are and put him on the spot. He works closely with Nick and all his wealth clients. And even though I think Simon is new to the design space, I think he took a cute little course online, but he is a really awesome digital designer of content. Give him a follow on LinkedIn. He and Nick also run a business where they create infographics and content. And this isn't just some basic level content. This is really comprehensive, easy to understand, but specialized, high level technicality, and just their website is one of my two favorite websites that they have for that. Finmix.com, FINMICS.com. Was that .com or .ca?
I think .com, maybe both work.
Okay, well, we bought all the websites, hopefully. And Nick, of course, is a former drummer for a punk band that my favorite punk band back in the day when I was in high school used to be signed to in Japan. So naturally, of course, he ended up as a financial advisor and fintech executive, because that is the natural progression. And he's got about over 10 years, as well as Simon, 10 years in financial planning and managing big books of business. So we're going to get right into the conversation. I'm going to, start with a few questions to poke around at our origin stories. But I want you just quickly, Simon, to tell us, and Nick to tell us, what are the letters behind your name? What do they mean? I don't have any letters behind my name. Tell me about yours.
Yeah, no. Thanks for the introduction. I think everyone knows what an MBA is, just a master's degree, but I have it in MBA in accounting. Actually, one of the reasons why I did it is I wanted to become an accountant, and ended up working at an accounting firm for a few number of years. But naturally, even in the accounting firm, I kind of shifted more towards the finance aspect of it. I also am a CFP, similar to Nick, which is a certified financial planner. CLU, Chartered Life Underwriter, which is a estate planning designation. CIM as well, which is a chartered investment manager, which allows me to do discretionary trading and become a portfolio manager. I'm starting to forget my designations here. I'm also a PFP, which is a professional financial planner, which is the planning designation you get when you're working in a bank, which is where I started. I am also an FCSI, which is a fellow of the Canadian Securities Institute, and an FMA, which is a financial managerial advisor, which is a designation that doesn't even exist anymore. But I guess that's everything. How about you, Nick?
Did you say CIM? I think you missed one.
I think that's the one that nobody wants. Nobody wants to be a portfolio manager. Would you want to do that, Grace, knowing what you know about it?
Actually, I think it would be quite interesting. There is a gentleman who rents one of the other offices that we work out of, and he is a portfolio manager. And some of the details he's told me about how he gets to work with clients and the difference between what he does versus a certified financial planner, for example, is very intriguing and different. The discretionary aspect is the main difference, where you just get that extra level of trust and ability to execute on the client's behalf.
That's a good answer. I want you to be my CIM now. There's a good confident answer. I wouldn't have the gusto to do it. I talked to a CIM for the first time at Kinsted Wealth not too long ago. Brent, a brilliant guy. I really enjoyed that conversation. That was the first time I actually became interested in what they do. He was telling me about, certain funds you only get access to. It's, when you know certain people and stuff. Nick, what do you got for us?
Well, I could give you a brief. I don't have nearly as many letters as Simon. Simon's more of an alphabet soup, but I was able to get my CFP financial planner. I have the CLU as well. I have the CHS, which used to, I think back in the day, be called an RHU, but it's just a health insurance specialist. And then I have some specialization in cash flow as well. But yeah, a little bit about me. I did play music. I think that, most musicians or athletes or even people who are working in restaurant business, anywhere where you work in the people business and you're in front of people and talking to a lot of people, you tend to find your way into the finance industry in one of the verticals. So that's a bit of my background, and been doing it for 10 or so years. Love working with Simon. We're kind of, we don't look alike, but we think alike, and we're coast to coast. We do a lot of good work together. And we love working with you, Sheldon, as well. You help us on the debt lending, mortgage side, and we just want to work with good people. So that's
I do have a mortgage company on the side. We work closely. We're me and Nick and Simon, and I know Grace from the conversation I've had with her. We're big believers in holistic advice, not just leaving people as confused project managers running between people trying to translate different, finance jargon. Really having people come together and work together to look out for clients. So I know where you guys are at. Tell us a little bit about. Because I'm going to start with a little bit of where we are today, Grace, and I'm always, I feel like I'm more interested in the position of like an operations manager or that key person that kind of is, because there's a lot going on in an advisor's office and they get to live a pretty good situation if they can find someone awesome in the role. So tell us a little bit about the role, and I know you're working on other things. Are you working towards any other licenses or certifications or anything?
Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction. So as you mentioned, I'm the operations manager for practice with Align Capital Partners. And it is an integral role because there needs to be someone who can facilitate that conversation in the background where the client may not be right with you, but there needs to be that line of communication to understand what's happening in the administrative side. Our clients facilitating transactions, are they doing transfers? It may be something that the advisor doesn't have time to track for the many clients that they serve, so they need someone to be there to act as that first initial point of contact to tell them what's happening, when, what needs to be done, what are the next action steps, and generally track everything that's going on in the practice. Because as you know, as your book grows, there's just so many more things to do and people to speak with, so you need to have that support in order to provide the best client service.
So you are going to be also, I guess, thinking that's a natural progression for a lot of people, as you are, taking on some of your own clients, and you're also managing your own book. So you're managing, pretty vast amount. I think a couple $100 million as far as the firm. You're helping oversee that book and those relationships, but you're also building your own book on the side as well, right? And are you looking at any additional certifications, any PFP, CFPs, or anything in your horizon?
Yeah, definitely. So I am helping to manage his book, which is over 200 million, which is a fair amount. And then I have my own book on the side. So wearing those two hats. And then the third hat I wear, as we just spoke about, is the operations manager. And my goal moving forward, yes, I want to go forward with the certified financial planner. And I'm also hoping to get the executor assistant certification so I can help with estate settlements. I would really like to be a certified trust planner as well. There's so many more things I'd like to do in my education career. I think I'm going to be a student forever, to be honest.
I like the idea of being a student forever, but I think I'm going to be the only person in finance without any letters behind my name ever. Now, I want to get some someday. But I'm in the financial technology space as a focus, and lending, really just doing the business development now. So I'll leave all that for you guys. And then when I need good advice, I'll come talk to you. So tell me a little bit I want a quick little couple lines from each of you. I'm going to go to each of you. Where did you, so I think, Simon, you said, right out of school. So like, tell us kind of just where did you start? Did you come right out of school? Did you get a little time in the bank? Where did you get into finance? And then that transition, even more importantly for me, the origin story of the self-employment within the financial industry. And then we'll go to Grace and then Nick.
Yeah, no, thanks. No, I actually have family that work in the financial service industry. So my mom worked at Scotiabank ever since I was a kid. Coming out of school, I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. My undergrad.
Was Mama Scotiabank lifer?
She was.
Okay.
Job she ever worked, actually. All, I think, 35 years there. So naturally my father was an engineer, wanted me to become an engineer. I was always good at math. Probably a little bit disappointed that I actually ended up going into finance. So when I was in university, there was an inflection point, I think, in my first year where, I was in sciences thinking about going into engineering. And like every young 18-year-old guy, you're like, yeah, I could go into engineering, but there's a lot more girls in finance and in marketing. So ended up going into business school, which is kind of a stupid reason now that I look back to it. So ended up going to business school because of that, which is actually a horrible idea. But from there, actually, after I finished school, wanted to actually become more of a financial analyst and kind of do that side of it. But started working a little bit of investment banking at accounting firm and in a bank, but ended up not really liking it as much as I thought I would. Then decided I wanted to work with people. And that was right around the 2008 market crash happened. And that's when I kind of started into the world of finance, really. Worked at a bank there, then worked at a couple more banks. So worked at TD, worked at Laurentian, worked at Desjardins. After working at 3 banks, decided, hey, I don't really like this. I kind of, not.
So how long were you in the big bank system?
Oh, geez, let me count that. Probably until I would say close to 9 years, actually, almost 9 years in the big bank system. And I think it was around 2013, I decided, hey, I'm gonna go back to school. Went back, started my MBA. Thought I'd become an accountant because I thought maybe that was safe. There's a lot of jobs out there. Ended actually working at an accounting firm probably from, I would say, 2018 to probably 2020. As of late, actually 2022 into December there. So did that for quite a while, actually, and decided actually, even when I was at an accounting firm, really, I got pushed more towards the financial side. The accountant saw that was really where my skill set was, and I really kind of stuck with it, actually. And that's actually, when I was about to leave, that's kind of how I came into contact with the 3 of you guys, actually 2 of you guys, and where we started.
Yes, which we'll get to, and I'm glad you mentioned the coming into the financial crisis as well, because I'm going to circle back with another question on that. Grace, give us the short version of your story. Where did you kind of start your working career, and where did it evolve to, and then kind of get to where you are now?
Perfect. Yeah. So my career actually started in the restaurant industry when I was 15. I jumped right. I was in grade 8, grade 9. I was like, I need some cash flow. Young teenage girl. I want to go to the mall. I want to shop. So I just jumped right into the workforce. And I started off in small restaurants and a bakery. And I just found a passion for customer service. I loved interacting with the people, but I also really had a passion for food. So I thought it was the best fit for me.
So what
Kept going.
was your first role at 15, if I may ask?
I was a sales associate at Cobb's Bread.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love Cubs
I
bread.
sold
My
bread.
daughter loves Cubs bread. That's a good place to start. It's much
It's
better than like a
amazing.
McDonald's or something. Actually, McDonald's, I know they get a lot of respect because there's a lot of order in there, but I love Cubs bread.
Yeah, they're
Continue.
they're great. And I always smelled like fresh baking. So can't go wrong with that. It just pushed me to grow in the food service industry. I worked my way up. I was a line cook. I did a sous chef, executive chef. Then I moved over to
You
pastry. I
never
went
told
to
me that
sales.
when we talked. You were an executive chef.
Yeah,
I can't
yeah.
handle the heat in the kitchen. I love the idea of cooking. I've always loved working with the peoples in the kitchen because it's chaos back there and I don't know how they go and you can't go back and mess them up, but I could never do it. I could never do
Yeah,
it. But
it
that would be
was.
a great skill set of multitasking, of meticulous detail. You can't be messing up those orders.
Nope, you can't. And that's why it was just more natural for me to go into the fine desserts, baking and pastry, because I had that attention to detail. I was very competitive. I wanted to showcase that food could be science and art all in one. So I did that for a few years. I helped open some restaurants. I got my seal. And after that, I was kind of left floundering. I felt there was this glass ceiling I could never break. I was always waiting for someone to retire above me so I could move up. So I figured, you know what? I'm going to throw my hat into the ring. I'm going to try front of house. I'm going to try serving because I love people. It'd be great. I did that for a few years, and that's actually how I met my first mentor who introduced me to the financial service industry. He was with World Financial Group, and it was the first time that someone had ever told me, "Hey, Grace, you could do more than just food service. I see something in you, and I think this could be a great opportunity for you." And what really got me into it was at that point, I was like, you know what? What do I have to lose? I'm not really going anywhere with food service. I want to do something where I can help people. So I took a chance and I dove right in and I got licensed and I never looked back.
Okay, so Nick, give us the short and sweet of your little journey. I know you started as a rock star. You had greasy hair. You had your shirt open with leather on stage. How to go from there?
Yeah, I don't know if the punk era was that much leather, but we grew up in that Blink 182 era where everyone liked fast rock and those guys were them, Green Day, all those classic late '90s musicians. So that's when I got into it. I broke my father's heart, I think, when I gave up hockey in my mid-teens because he was hoping for hockey star and I tried to be a rock star. So it's an interesting journey. When I finished the music attempt at a career, I was pretty lost. So, I was in and out of university. I was taking business school because that's what everyone told me you should do if you don't want to become a doctor or, I'm not interested in engineering. It's always a safe bet. Take social science, go get a business degree. You'll be able to get a career. And I grew up with a banker father and a dental hygienist mother. So to them, it was all about stability, predictability, hireability. So they really, really hammered in post-secondary education. But I actually did not enjoy
That's
university.
the same idea that parents want for engineering, I think, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. And I mean, that path is something that I feel like that generation really believed in. Everyone needs to fight hard for good grades in high school, take your university level courses, go to university, get hired somewhere, get a good job, benefits, whatever the cliche sayings were. And my personality was always more entrepreneurial, which I think trying to be a musician is. And I just was never satisfied with day-to-day stuff being exactly the same. So university wasn't big for me. I just loved the social aspect of it. And then somebody said, Nick, a manufacturing Toyota plant's hiring. Why don't you apply there? I was in my early 20s. They're like, it pays, almost $40 an hour. I think it'd be great. So I applied. Within 3 weeks, I was hired. Next thing I knew, I was building cars. And the only thing good about that was it got you in really good shape. Everyone was pretty young and social. and you're making enough money to start to see what it's like to be buying big ticket items, buying homes, buying cars, going on nice vacations. So I started to realize at that point, I really liked money, but I didn't fully understand it. Even though I had a father who was a banker, he just taught me how to have good credit and not take on too much debt and pay my bills on time. Get started with your small RSPs and what have you. And that's because that's along the lines of what they taught young people. So for some reason, when I was in there, I just kept being drawn to finance, kept YouTubing it, watching it, hated every moment I was at the plant, except for when I got a paycheck. And talked to my old man about joining the bank. And he actually gave me some of the best advice I could have ever gotten from him at that time. He said, Nick, you do great in finance, but whatever you do not apply at the bank. You need to figure out how to get into this space, be independent, be holistic, learn insurance, learn investments, come at it from that angle. He said the bank was great for my heyday, but I see there's some changing going on there, and I think you'd really excel and really enjoy the independent space, because he also knew I didn't really like having a hierarchy of command, people sort of telling you what to do all the way up the ladder, whether it made sense or not, and you're just doing it because you want to have a paycheck at the end of every week. So I actually, like Simon, ended up at Desjardins, but their independent channel, where they did insurance. You could sell different companies and things like that. And it really was sink or swim. This isn't a knock on that organization, but the time that I entered the business, it was that time where it's like, put 100 names on a page, go call them, try and get them to buy some products from you.
That's exactly what Freedom 55 told me when they tried to recruit me. I was tried to be recruited by everybody: Sun Life, WFG, Primerica, Freedom 55, and this, that, and we're going to get a little bit, we're going to talk at some point. We're going to just lightly poke a little bit, because we have all had an experience. I don't know if I told you all my experience, Grace. We've had some MLM experience, and there's really good people. There's some really wonderful people in these MLMs, but I don't think the DNA. Well, we'll get into that in a second when we get a little further in this journey. So, is it safe to say? Tell me if there's anyone that disagrees with this statement. I'm going to make a statement. You tell me if it's an unfair statement to make. And it's one that I'm careful to make. I almost feel uncomfortable making, because you don't want to make it seem like, but at the same time you do. Like, can somebody be a janitor today and, even at 40 years old and decide to go be a doctor? I believe that they can. I think that people can go into almost any, you've heard lots of these stories, but just, I guess, to encourage people that if they, there's maybe people that are unemployed at home, or that are working in a role that really doesn't make them happy, but they're interested in finance. They care about people. There's things that you can pursue. So people coming from any path could go and make a living in financial services. Keys are get the education, get the understanding. Ideally, start at even at a firm like working in one of the many different types of roles within a firm that's already up and successful, and making your way into that self-employment like Grace did, because jumping right into that sink or swim type of situation that Nick did. I personally never really wanted to do it. I did end up doing it on the mortgage side, but I wasn't convinced in my younger years about doing it for financial services. But do we all agree that anybody that, again, you don't just want anybody coming in and doing it, because that's part of the problem that we'll get into the MLM part, but people have come in with the right, I guess, ways, which is, I'm going to get educated and I'm going to go out and I'm going to treat people like my mother or my grandmother. Does anyone disagree?
Yeah, I can jump into that. I think this industry,
caveats if you want. Throw some caveats if you want.
Well, this industry,
there's a fine line. You don't just want to be just everybody come do it, no matter what you're, because some organizations are just, they talk about the money, come make the money, have the money. Whatever you do, if you try to do something awesome in life, I believe you will eventually have money chase you.
Yeah, this industry
it gets a bit funny.
This industry has a place for everybody. It just depends on what you're going to do in the industry, right? Maybe one of the more routine day-to-day administrative roles is better for you, and you end up working for a team of advisors or a larger offshoot boutique firm, and there's a specific role for you in that firm. And I think that other people excel more as a front runner role. They're out there. They love meeting people, mingling, and bringing them in. But you better not put paperwork in front of them, or put anything that requires any type of admin follow-up work in front of them, because they'll fumble, fall, and fail. So I feel like this business is now morphing into the complement business. You want to join this business as part of a group, part of a team, find the part of the business you know, like, and love, and then you do that, and you have the right kind of people around you that do the other stuff.
That's well said. I think even when you were telling me about, just generally how awesome your office was, Grace, and the people that you now have longevity in a lot of the people, where there wasn't always, and it's not always easy to find that in any industry really, but once you get those good people, honestly, I could see myself, but I'm a pretty flexible person in general, doing any of the roles that Grace told me about. And I could probably end up being like Simon's mom. I would just do that for us. As long as I have a good crew of people, I come in, we've got a well-oiled machine. We're always trying to make it a little bit better. We're treating people in a way where we actually care. I could be happy in so many of the different roles within that, especially when you're making such a difference in people's lives with money. I mean, I don't know if you guys have had somebody cry on the phone with you yet. I certainly have a few times. And a good cry. I've had people cry about situations they've gotten themselves into as well. But it's a wonderful feeling to be able to have.
So I want to comment on this. I think I kind of agree with Nick on the point that there's probably a place for everybody, but not anybody can be anything, right? I think you got to have the right personality, the right drive, and the right smarts to make it, right? And we see this in our industry a lot. There's a high degree of failure. Like, most advisors don't make it past the first year. Even larger chunk don't make it past the 5th year. And I think the problem is that sometimes maybe they've got blinders on, and they see the more glamorous roles, right? The more front running roles. You want to be the top IROC broker at RBC Dominion Securities, or you want to be at Scotia Private Wealth, and maybe that's not the right role for you in the finance industry, right? And or maybe like Nick said, some people might start off in the lending side like you did, and may realize that's not for them, and they end up in the investment side, or vice versa. So I agree and I disagree. I don't think anyone can be anything in the industry, but I think that they're usually, because it's such a wide variety of roles and such a wide breadth of roles, that you can find something you will like, and that's something you are good at. And I think my advice, if I was to give it to my younger self, or even younger people coming in, it's just, don't be so focused on that one thing that you want now, because you honestly, you're not going to know where your career is going to take you, and you're not going to know what you're going to like, in 10 years, or what you actually end up liking. So
that's actually really good, Sammy. I would agree with that. You want to be the nice, like, kind of make everybody feel good. Anybody can be anything you can be, but like it does require certain different skill sets. And I think any job that we've had, we can bring lots of skills out of. If I used to scrub toilets, I can bring that into something I got from doing that job. I can bring into a future role, and not everything, but and it's a good point too, that there is lots of different roles. I think money coaches is going to be an emerging thing, because that's the front line of behavioral finance. It has become a thing in the US, hasn't really kind of popped off in Canada yet, but I think there's no real conduit for that. I know several people that have their CFP that just wanted to be money coaches, but they weren't sure how to go do that. There was no real channel for that, so they went and they got their CFP. And so yeah, I think that was a really astute assessment, Simon.
Mm-hmm. That was a great assessment. I would just like to add on that one point about rejection being an advisor and the dropout rate of new advisors in the field. I think one key characteristic that, if anyone's considering joining the workforce in the financial industry, is you have to have crazy tenacity. You're going to be told no so many times. You will be rejected so many times. You will probably cry, probably will scream, but it's that fight to get past it that will really make you successful. And I think, just coming back onto the origin stories, coming from the restaurant industry, working for horrible people, horrible guests, built that up, and was one of the successful points for me of transitioning into this field, was knowing that people are going to say no, and there's going to be really hard times. It's not all glorious money making. There's some real grunt work before.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, and because that's a sober view you want to give people. You know what I mean? Like when people are, because there is, again, certain organizations that will just talk about the rah 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 and put how much money they made last month in their t-shirts and everything else. But there is a lot of pain and suffering to get to that point. Thankfully, at some point, the goal is for it mostly to be clients. Now you have this really successful practice, book of business. You've done a really good job by people, and now people are coming to you, and you get to say yes or no at some point, hopefully.
So it's interesting you say that, Grace, because I think I didn't really become client facing until maybe 2012 when I got my insurance license. Prior to that, I was more corporate and analyst roles. And I think that was the hardest part when like transitioning and getting into it was, and it took me the longest time to adjust, was trying to deal with the ups and downs of some days you'll have a client really like you and things are going well, you get a client, and other days you'll have a bunch of no's or people getting upset at you. And you just go through a lot of emotional ups and downs. And I think me and Nick, we go through this all the time too, still nowadays. I think we're a little bit better at handling it than when I was much younger. But I actually think that is probably one of the hardest parts for, I don't think a lot of people realize coming into it, is the highs. The highs are quite high when things are going well, and the lows are quite bad when if you feel like you've worked on something for months at a time and you get client after client after client saying no to you. It just, you can't help but take it a little bit personally, I think, and think, is it me? Do people not like me? Am I just not presenting this right? And I think that's a tough part. I don't know if that's what you found really difficult too when you started.
Did you have someone nice enough to do what Grace just did for the audience and give you that sobriety before you went out, or did you just get the shockwave?
Oh, you just get the shockwave. You just keep getting your ass kicked every day, right? That's how I learned.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no real residency period for this business. Like this business, I feel, is a lot like medicine and becoming a physician or a family doctor of some sort, because we're working with people. There's a lot of emotional things at play, and it's a very sensitive topic. If we don't do a good job or we misstep in some way, we can really harm people. So I relate this career a lot to medical professionals, and they have a long residency period. Can you imagine if you just freshly graduated, passed your exams, and then they threw you in the hospital and said, okay, go start seeing patients? You didn't have mentorship. What's that?
But don't screw up, because you'll
but don't screw up, right? And by the way, to top it all off, you're in this business, a lot of times you don't earn any income if no one does business with you. At residency, they talk about how they don't earn as much as a full-fledged physician. They at least have something coming in. So we're constantly playing with, I have no money coming in, I'm dealing with all this rejection, and people start to second guess themselves. It's a really hard tug of war. You'll be looking at the job postings every 3 months. Like, am I in the right place? Should I go back into another career? Did I make a mistake? Grace's point about tenacity is it needs to be really highlighted. It takes a lot to get through those first few years. We don't have residency period.
Well, then I'm going to ask another question, I think, related to that. I'll start with Grace and then Simon and then Nick, because I'm going to ask you, Nick, while I'm getting them to answer, if you could, and remember, it's not the 1930s. We don't use Google anymore. This is a chat GPT task. You're going to go and find out, where do financial advisors lay? I know that dentists are supposedly, though I never fully understood that, because like dentists are the most stressed professional. They have like the highest, bad things rate and everything else. So while you look that up, Nick, I'm going to ask Grace and Simon, and then I'll come to you, Nick. How has it been as an experience for you building your career in finance during all of these gong show crises that we have? First we had the COVID, I don't know what was before the COVID, and now we've got like the greatest, I think, depression coming of all time, or supposedly. What have you noticed? Have you, because you were in a little bit before COVID, so what did you notice change, and how has that been? And I think it's good for us to have that early in our careers.
Yeah, for me, I've got a few different experiences, because while I'm in the office working as an employee and working on an existing book, I hadn't noticed too much change. The only real big difference was people would rather speak over Zoom or Teams rather than come in the office. So you kind of missed that personal connection aspect of any meeting, of really getting to know the client. You don't get to see those little nuances or the body language. But for me, as an independent advisor, I noticed actually people were seeking more help during this time. They felt more lost than ever. There was no resources to rely on, so many questions unanswered. Where do you go to get these answers? People just wanted to know some basic financial literacy information. And I think it was the perfect opportunity to be entering into this field to be able to provide that, because that's one of my personal core values as an advisor, is really building the education of the client so they understand what we're talking about as we're building their plan, so they are more confident. They're not second guessing, why did I go forward with this? 3 years down the road, they will still be as confident about what we built together as day one.
Yeah, I mean, so the people after COVID, did people stay on Zoom, or did they start coming back into the office, or did that become the new culture, the new norm?
I've seen it shift a little
I've
bit.
never seen people in person, so I always push people to Zoom.
I always push people for in person. I think people need that push to get out of their comfort zone. I think after COVID, people are kind of in that relaxed state where they're okay with Zoom, but it's so much better to do in person. Let's get out of that comfort zone. Let's go for coffee. Let's go for lunch. Let's meet. Let's talk. And I think it's important as a new advisor to remember that paradigm shift. People are still very cautious, but we need to remind them that period is lifting. We're more safe. We can get back into those old ways of meeting and go back to a more in-person workflow.
So yes, Grace, I actually really prefer to see people in person. I'm very much a people person. I think that seeing clients in person closes that trust gap and lets them know that you're a real person. You're not some cyber random person. But for me, because I started in the big banks, we always were doing business nationally over the phone. I would always have people push back and say, "Oh, is there a branch I can go into?" And you'd kind of try to win them over with some rapport. But I do really think in person is better. Mortgages are a little bit more transactional. I'd like to make them less transactional, make them more ongoing and holistic. Again, that's why I'm working with Nick and Simon on that bigger picture side. But for financial planning and advisors, especially, especially you've got a nice central office downtown. It's ideal if you can have them come in as often as possible. And I hope someday that we can have some way to make it feel as in person as possible, even if we have to do virtual. So Simon, I'm going to kick over to you. Building your career in some of the greatest crises, how has that been for you? Do you think that you had an easier time getting conversations about finances because people are freaking out, or was it harder because now they don't want to do anything, they're going into save mode?
Finance Village is sponsored by Pocket Finance, a technology platform on mobile app and web that improves collaboration and engagement between financial professionals, their clients, and their professional ecosystem. You can check it out at pocketfinance.com, and there is early adopter benefits on the go. And we are also brought to you by FinSense, a digital mortgage company serving all of Canada and ensuring that you get the same trustworthy mortgage advice that you would want your dear mother to get.
I think 2020 was pretty tough. But to be honest, I think it was probably one of the best things that could happen to the financial services industry. In terms of how a lot of the investment and insurance companies worked in our industry, it was very technology behind. I think when I was working at Desjardins in 2017, that was it was probably before 2016, right around the time Nick was working. This was at one of the largest banks. I worked at Desjardins Asset Management, and that year I started, we were just starting to accept faxes instead of original copies for forms. So
do people still use fax machines, by the way?
Yes, they do.
Okay, because I feel like they're still they were always a staple. They didn't go.
Yeah.
Because it's super secure, is it? It's supposedly super secure.
Is it though? Because you can fax it to the wrong number. It's not. It can be intercepted. But I think it was tough at first because obviously I was working in an accounting firm trying to bring in large multi-million dollar clients and I've never met them, right? And you're doing everything in Zoom. I think the first few months is tough, but ultimately, I think a lot of the companies adjusted the way they did things. People started getting used to doing things virtually. The processes got better, and I think just overall, even now, as much as I like doing things in person, it's a lot more efficient to do things over Zoom. There's no driving time. There's no waiting time, and I think that if it wasn't for COVID, me and Nick wouldn't be able to do what we do now. To be honest, we wouldn't be able to be kind of these virtual financial planners that deal with professionals and doctors from all the way from BC all the way to Ontario. And just even the way we actually processed investments and insurance, it wasn't possible prior to 2020. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but I don't think most insurance companies accepted DocuSign prior to
No,
COVID.
I hear about that all the time from Jason.
Everything was wet ink, right? We were driving, getting wet signatures, or we were mailing documents to be mailed back. It was the most inefficient process for probably any industry.
See, that's really interesting because now that I'm hearing all your opinions, because I'm a true believer in ultimately at the end of the day, two things. The warmth and bringing that human touch into finance, which I'm a big believer in Grace's thesis of let's provide an opportunity to get in person as much as possible. But I'm also totally and completely obsessed with efficiency. If you're a more mature firm, I think it would be more realistic. You have to have some kind of balance because when you're new, if you're trying to develop your book of business, you both have to close the trust gap by getting in front of the people that want you actually in front of them and being efficient and not wasting time driving around a million places to people that are never going to close business with you. So that's a delicate balance that you have to have at the beginning of your financial career. Otherwise, that could make a pretty big impact.
I think just over COVID, we've learned to give that human touch, or I was going to say touch people online. I'm like, no, that doesn't sound right. Just give that human touch online and just really build that rapport. And that's why I think these Zoom meetings are really good that we do. It's a good way to meet people. And it's funny. I think me and Nick have a lot of clients we've actually never met in person ever.
We do. Yeah. Yeah. And to be honest, we've opened up coast to coast, like Simon said, BC to Ontario. We're as far as Nova Scotia. And, there's so many clients that we could have never worked with. And Simon and I would have had the hardest time imaginable working on files together and cases together and closing business together if we didn't have the technology advancement that COVID forced. It wasn't that the industry wanted it. The advisors and the people that are working with clients wanted it, but I feel like the ivory tower executives that were pulling the strings of the industry, they were more driven by fear and security and the fact that what they had worked and they knew it was safe. So they didn't really want to involve technology. I think even in banks, they're still operating on DOS system behind the scenes.
One of our systems that we work with is still DOS based. We're trying to move out of that program, but it's taken almost the 3 years that I've worked here to sort of start a new platform. But that's a great point about the efficiency. Being able to do things over DocuSign electronically, it has sped up a lot of that process. So thank you guys for bringing that up because I didn't get a chance to mention that. So excellent.
Yeah, and you guys got a bright future. You got some very, very, very smart people at the top level of the line. I'll say that. Sorry, you were saying, Simon?
You came from BMO, don't they have the most archaic lending system there? I know that you guys had a reputation for that, and I think I was reading even when I was doing my MBA that there was a case study done at BMO that they had introduced a new lending system, which was far superior to the old you guys had an old DOS-based system, right? That it was rejected because the older people didn't want to accept new technology.
Yeah, and they actually had a doozy with Salesforce too. There's a lot that they wanted us to do on Salesforce, but there was limited engagement, we'll say.
Well, that's
And-
interesting
But
because
banks have a super hard time. I remember with CIBC, they tried to get us to start using a secure portal to get clients to send things there, and we tried to get them to do that. Clients didn't use it at all. They just kept sending us emails, and I think for like a whole year, there was basically like 3% adoption.
there is client pushback. Like, we're talking about efficiency that we want. I mean, I'm 37 years old. I want efficiency. Anything that's not efficient and that I can't do on my phone, it's annoying. But there's clients that Simon and I work with. What? There's clients Simon and I work with.
It's one of those funny because it's true. Like if I try to use a software that doesn't have a great mobile experience, I'm offended. You've offended my ancestors.
It's true. When you have to like use your browser and then you have to hit the double A on the iPhone and see desktop view just to make it work properly on your phone. And
I didn't know it was the thing. Well, thanks for
inefficiencies
taking
there,
that
but
pain. Didn't know that was an option. So
yeah. Oh, perfect. There you go.
I think the problem too is our industry's filled with a lot of much older men, which are mostly in their 60s, and they're and I can speak for my own experience that like the book I took over was from a much older advisor in his mid 60s. He barely knows how to use email. He still uses a BlackBerry that
So he's definitely not checking his spam.
Since 2000. No, he's not.
He doesn't know that folder exists.
He doesn't. Yeah, and I think that's a lot of the reason why the industry is not pushed forward either, is because of the type of people that work in it, right? Like, they don't want it to be pushed forward. They like the idea of doing everything on pen and paper. They like the idea of not having to use technology. And I mean, me and Nick both work with older advisors where we took over fairly, significant books, and they had a lot of clients, and it was, both me and Nick had a heck of a time trying to actually bring them into the digital world. Like, I literally had to scan physical folders that were stacked in my advisor's office from 1983, where the folder hasn't been opened, and just to even show them that something like a CRM exists, like it was mind blowing to them, right?
And they can sell their book of business. I know a guy who bought a book of business from a much older guy in his 70s, and he said he would have paid. This was his words, and this was just a conversation we were having about technology. We didn't even intend to get into his book. And he had, everything was manual. Everything, all 1,200 clients were in cabining files in like folders. And he said he would have paid significantly more for that book if it had been digitized. So I want you to speak a little bit on that, Grace. I know that the place you're working, he's not like a really older guy. He's kind of probably in his prime. He's probably around some of our ages on this call. But what kind of conversations do you guys have in that regard? Do you find that more, because the people I think that would push for it more, if I would assume, would be the people that are administrating, that are managing the operations. Of course, an advisor, he doesn't have to deal with it. Of course, he doesn't want to adopt it, especially if he ever has to deal with it at all. But some of the people that they'll have working with them, I would think, have that in mind sometimes, because that's going to make life a lot easier, right? I can tell you the tellers at the banks, maybe independent advisors want to keep it old school, but the tellers at the banks never wanted to keep things the way they used to file things with deposits and stuff, because that was crazy. I remember doing the paper format when I worked at hotels as a hotel manager as a very young lad, and that there's a lot of things that can go wrong with a paper system when you're managing putting people in rooms and you don't want to put them in each other's room.
Yeah, I came into the industry, everything was paper forms, wet signature, pen. And then if you messed up, like either having the client sign off on the error or just redoing the form completely, depending on your penmanship. But the practice I work at right now is kind of in that transition between both worlds. We've got roughly just under 500 clients, and each one of them has a physical paper folder in a cabinet, which is partly why I'm still full-time in the office, is moving those files into digital format. But some of those items are from 7, 8, 9 years ago, and it's just...
Is that ongoing still today?
Yeah, it's part of my daily. So if I'm slow, I'm scanning in forms, I'm building physical digital files, condensing the paper files to what's actually relevant, what needs to be kept, what can be like what's duplicates. So a lot of grunt work there, just administrative stuff, but it's definitely beneficial because it's so much easier to track once it's digital. If it's on paper, you're digging through hundreds of pages trying to find information to reproduce it into something digital. So that is something where having a good key person to help that your advisor or an advisor convert their book into digital format would be a significant value. As you were just saying, that person would have purchased that book for so much more had that already been done. But as you were saying, some of the older advisors who are transitioning into their retirement, they're content to continue the way that they've known the industry. And then it's the new up and coming advisors who are gaining traction and building their books, who are of this digital era and helping, to transition into this new digital world.
We just got to tell them they can sell it for 3 million instead of 2 million. It's just like doing, I guess, a few renovations before you sell your home, right? I mean, it's going to make a big difference. And I certainly saw that when we were shopping for condos. The little things that people did, even to just have a closet, have a lot more storage functionality, was like mesmerizing for us. So we're gonna finish off. So I'm gonna finish off with two things. We're gonna talk a little bit about the place that we have to talk about, because this is where a lot of people are gonna have their origin stories, for good or for bad. Is a little bit about the MLM space. And then I'm going to end by asking you guys, what does the epitome of your financial career look like when you're at the place where you're there to rest forever, like Simon's mom did at Scotiabank? Where does that look like that you want to have optimized? And it can be multiple things. It can be saying, I want to have my own book and I want to continue to be operations manager because I think it's awesome. Whatever multiple things you have going on, the podcast, whatever else, what does that look like when you get to where you want to be in a career within the financial industry, regardless of what those segments look like? But after we talk about where a lot of people start, MLMs within the financial industry. So we're not going to talk about any names of any companies. We're just going to talk about the idea of MLM. I have had some experience from it. I've tried to be recruited into all of them, in and out of finance. I've never gone into one. I ended up going the bank path by accident, then eventually having Simon, Nick, and I all met in an MLM that did an excellent job of selling the idea that maybe they weren't an MLM, but they definitely were the MLM-iest that you could be. But we'll start a little bit with Grace. I know that you actually, and this does end up being a good thing for people. I'm not going to stand the fact. One thing I like is that they do get new people in the industry. They do talk a lot about, wanting to serve the underserved, the middle class and such like that. And a lot of the people that don't necessarily have $1 million and get that financial advice. I love a lot of parts of those messaging. I love that they're bringing a lot of new people in. I love that there's, again, that I come from the restaurant industry myself. I probably wouldn't have looked at closely at finance if I hadn't had attempts from Freedom 55 and Primerica to recruit me, because it just didn't occur to me that world was even an option for me. I think most people think that you need to have like an economics degree to be in finance. I think there's a lot of people that have that confusion. They don't look at the banker in the same way as they look at maybe somebody that works in your guys' types of roles or your type of firm, Grace. But I want you to share a little bit about when you first got invited, kind of what your experience was a little bit, and kind of, when you decided that you wanted to move out of that space and into a more conventional one, or I don't know what the word is to use. I love to see people get into finance. I love to see them graduate into true independence where they actually own their book. And I think that's one of those other big things with the MLM space. But tell us a little bit about your experience, Grace, and then we'll go Simon, Nick.
Yeah, thanks so much. So my experience, I was kind of recruited into an agency, and the real reason that it sparked interest was their mission, which was to leave the average Canadian better off than where they had found them. And I had just heard some staggering statistics. One, as an example, being over 95% of Canadians would retire broke or below the poverty line. And that it just broke my heart. I couldn't imagine that being in a first world country, that there's so many of us would not be able to retire and continue our lifestyle, that we would have to work. You know, we see so many seniors at Walmart or wherever they may need to work just to bring in that income to feed themselves. And it floored me so much that I kind of said, you know what, I don't really know too much about this company in particular, but I know that I could make a difference. And I think I should, you know, explore this. So that's why I joined particularly. And the reason I stayed was the mentorship, particularly that I received with the group that I joined. My mentor is actually still one of, I would say, a close friend of mine today. Going to be going to his birthday party here next weekend. And even though I left his group, he still supports me in my journey to become an independent advisor, which I don't think is something you'll find with any other company. It's you leave, you've left them and you're on to something else. But to have that continuing support is huge. And I think that's why a lot of people are interested in joining. They feel that camaraderie, they feel believed in, supported, that they could actually make their dreams come true. I think one of the downfalls is there isn't a lot of conversation around the big picture. Okay, so yes, you've joined, you've got your licenses. Well, now what? Are you going to be, you know, independent? Are you going to be sales focused? Are you going to go into investments, insurance? As we discussed previously, there's so many paths to go down. How do you really navigate which one is the best for you? And
Don't you usually start, I guess, with a focus on insurance sales, right?
yeah, usually that's my understanding of where it is. But I just heard a lot of people as I was growing while I was still with that company, there was a lot of negative connotations, some positive connotations, and some people who only rely on what they read from the internet. So you get a mixed bag of experiences. And then as you're trying to grow and meet new people, grow your network, you're going to run into those different experiences with that particular company. So it could leave you in a more disadvantaged position because of their name and the experience that they've given to so many Canadians.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's so many really, really, I would say, like, you know, you think about some of the big brands, and I won't name any of the big brands, but like you think about some of the big brands, you think that, you know, people that, I mean, there's a general sense of like maybe they're getting into it to make the big money and to manage large amounts of money and to have that kind of lifestyle that's perceived about a financial advisor. One thing I do like about the MLMs is there's so many people that came into that for the genuine reasons that they were pitching. Let's care about the average person. Let's, you know, so the people, a lot of the people coming in at that ground level, not at the top of that necessarily infrastructure. That's all kind of, you know, I don't know what's going on there, but the people that are coming in at that front line are coming in for the reasons that you just described. They're hearing the stats. They do a really good job of sharing the stats. And there's so many people that I love in there. But once you get into an MLM, it's like everything else. And if you weren't in there for like many years before you left, then it's always interesting because that becomes like the whole world of of what they believe, I guess. And I'll let maybe Simon jump in a bit there and share a little bit about his own independent experience. Did you have more than one, Simon, or was it just our shared experience?
More than one.
Okay, tell us about your first one.
Well, you know, working in B2B sales in the banks, basically my role when I was at the bank was to manage the relationship between, let's say, TD and Desjardins and the companies that they dealt with, right? So that was different financial advising companies out there. And a lot of those companies would be MLMs, right? Some of the big ones out there. So I dealt with a lot of the agents and the agencies in pretty much Alberta here. And I had a similar experience to Grace. I think in the sense that a lot of people join it for the right reason, and I don't necessarily would say that I have an issue with the MLM model. I think there are, like any other companies, there's a lot of good people in there, but there's also sometimes you'll run into a few bad apples that kind of ruin it for everybody else. And I think that's kind of what you were almost kind of alluding to, Grace, is that sometimes it's really tough to be associated with a company if someone else somewhere that you had nothing to do with does something bad, and this other client has a really bad experience with it, and now for no particular reason and no fault of your own, you're associated with that bad experience that the client or someone that knew the client had. And that's I think I think that's more the issue that I think sometimes a lot of people have with these MLMs, is that there's so many different agents and so many people there. And I don't know the big ones, how many there is. I think probably 10,000 agents. It's impossible all those agents are in there for all the right reasons, unfortunately. And again, that's like that for every company, no matter where you go to.
They always talk
Everyone's
about
going to be
licensed. They always talk about, when you say 10,000,
Yeah.
all of these different companies, they always talk about licensed agents, and all of them do that, not just the MLM. So the big one, all the big ones, even in the big banks, you can end up getting a bad name. Do you guys remember those? I think it was like 4, 5, 6 years ago. They were talking about how the call centers and all the banks were just this insanely high pressure sales environment. Do you guys remember hearing about that? It was all over the news. And I can tell you that was very real. And it wasn't that I was sitting around a bunch of evil, slick salesmen that were trying to like call people in. There was just really intense sales culture from the very, very, very top, and the infrastructure and the leadership. And I believe that I've always believed that there can be an MLM infrastructure of sorts done in the right way. But usually those people working those firms are only having very specific strategies they're being taught to kind of do things, a very common way. They usually are only making, what's the percentage? I don't even know. Is it like 60% less than they should be making?
Probably even less than that, depending on what contract level you're at. But I guess that really brings up a more interesting point. You're right. Like, a lot of people that go into these things are fairly new to the industry, and they don't really necessarily know, what the right way to do something is, or what the wrong way to do it. They're just being taught from people above them. And I mean, I guess at a certain point, when do you become the person that is, you get into more of a leadership position and you have a little bit more responsibility? Shouldn't you actually take a little bit more responsibility in pushing forward a better name for the industry, for the company? And I always kind of struggle with that in the back of my head, because even though I had a lot of friends in those kind of MLM world, a lot of the agents, I saw what they did because they didn't know. And I saw some pretty, let's say maybe not the best solutions provided to the clients sometimes, but that wasn't necessarily their fault, because they were told to do that. And I think you bring up an interesting point in, where does it get to that level where, you start becoming, a little bit more responsible for the actions of your company and the actions for that it's taken. And which actually brings me to where we kind of all met was, you're right. Like we worked at a company where we all met, and, it was kind of told that it wasn't really an MLM. And
even though everybody at the top came from a purified MLM background their entire careers.
And me and Nick were brought in as CFPs because, we were brought in as subject matter experts to both help the agents deal with higher net worth cases, but also help with a lot of the training and help with developing more of a system. And I remember the first day me and Nick met, and the leader, let's say, was trying to explain to us, he'd give us scenarios, and then me and Nick would come up with, this is what we would do in this situation. And then he would go off in a completely opposite direction, which was extremely sales focused. And we would look at each other, and I'd be like, I think that was my first sign that I was like, something's not quite right here. And
you forget that to get that tingle, right?
And that was like, you start getting that little tingling. I think Nick started asking questions about that. And while you obviously you were there, Sheldon, I think I think the issue was we all started talking to each other because we had that little tingling where we're like, I don't know.
Something's not right.
This sounds very salesy and not what we're really, not what the industry standard is, not what we're taught in our CFP, not what is actually going to benefit the client or even help the advisor grow as an advisor, right? And I think that really made me question everything there, and I think that's where things started to fall apart. But I'll let Nick talk a little bit more about his experience because we kind of had the similar area where we started there.
Talk about that, Nick, and talk about that long-term money. Like, people always think like, I'm going to make what I can today. Have your customer trust you so much in your confidence in your heart that they always want to deal with you forever. Get multiple business.
Yeah, I'll comment on what Simon and I were brought in, as he mentioned, as CFP subject matter experts. We were there because this particular firm would talk a lot about how they wanted to change the image of what they were trying to build to actually be more credible, dealing with business owners, professionals, and not do so much transactional sales. But the interesting thing was, when we're being told as CFPs, don't actually show any of these advisors what it is you're doing. Like, you want to keep them in the dark to a point where they're so dependent that they'll need our firm to the point where they would never leave. And when there's strategies and solutions that they're trying to tell Simon and I to position go completely against what we committed ourselves to doing for the industry by signing on as certified financial planners, that's when you realize that now we're at a point in our career where we're not going to jeopardize what we bring to the industry just to line our pockets with a few dollars. And we're also not going to sit there quietly while we don't do what's right for the young advisors that are trying to enter this business for the right reasons. And we certainly don't want to damage what is being done to their prospects and clients, and in most cases, very close family members that have trusted them to help them with their finances. So from that, we started talking a lot. We realized we didn't want to be there, and we made a quick exit. But I would say, the MLM structure, the network marketing structure is generally full of really good people for the most part. And I also blame a lot of our industry as to why so many people end up there. I find that our industry, in firms that could really train, develop, and bring people to the next level and push them in their careers, are a lot colder. It's a lot harder barrier of entry. They're more judgmental on the people, to come in. So because of that, and the open door policy, the wide open arms that these MLM companies have, non-judgmental entry points, and saying, yeah, be part-time, keep your job, come in, learn this industry, we'll teach you what to do. It's very warm and welcoming. It's like it's our faults, I would say. And I know that Simon, and I'm sure Grace and Sheldon, you guys have all met people in this industry that are very well decorated. They're considered to be top people. They might even get CFP fellowships, but they don't want to train anybody. They don't want to mentor anybody. They don't want to help anybody get in the industry. And they're probably the first people to judge those people that want to come in the industry, saying, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Guy that worked on my car, but this industry is not for you. When you don't know anything about that person who might be changing the oil on your car at the local Jiffy Lube, right? He might be there, or she might be there just to pay their bills, and they're looking for their new career. So I'd say it's our fault if we want to change the way that these MLM companies have a stranglehold on new people. Then we have to be better on our end as well, and be more welcoming and train these. I like
your humility. You give us someone to blame now. It's Nick's fault that MLM's the way they are.
I blame myself. I blame all everybody on here that's not doing it.
It's true. So I want to touch on one more quick thing here before we get into the epitome of what your guys' career looks like and we close off. Because this is just one thing I do want to touch on. I want your guys' opinion. Whatever company is doing it, I can't stand. It makes me want to just puke. when they have, I heard there was a company, I don't even know which one it was, but it was one of the MLMs. They had an event down in Vegas where everybody was wearing a t-shirt that showed the most amount of money they made in a month. Everybody was running around with these t-shirts, and I actually saw a picture of the event. So this is like verifiably happened. There's also a lot of them. I don't know. They have like the $500,000 crown and the $50,000 anklet, or I don't know, all these different and they broadcast. So I personally am not a fan of advisors going out and broadcasting publicly what they make. If you want to, hey Nick, we're in the bathroom together, we're at the urinals, and I'll just be, hey man, I'm having a really great year privately. Cool. But
you want to talk about how much we make in the bathroom?
Yeah, all this different apparel and the money that they're making and the t-shirt at the event. It's just too much. We got to cut. Can we all agree that needs to be cut right out? That needs to be gutted right out. Are we on the same page? Am I rude for saying this?
No.
Well, I mean, if I had to go to the hospital and my doctor walked in the room and had like 500,000 written on their forehead and like, this is my annual income.
Yeah, thanks for making me feel like a loser.
That's kind of strange.
Okay, so what is your ideal state look like? I know we're all young here, but let's say 10 years from now, we're at our epitome. What does that epitome look like for you, Grace?
My epitome would probably be running a practice kind of similar to where I'm working now. But I think the biggest thing that I would want in my future is to be training other young advisors who are up and coming, as we were just talking about the MLM experience, to give that opportunity to new people so there isn't such a blockade to get in and to grow in this industry. I think I would like to be able to facilitate that for people, and also kind of have a practice that is more holistic of an approach. I really enjoy the insurance aspect, but investments are important, mortgages are important, accounting is important, tax planning, all of those things I would want to have under one roof so a client can come in, get an amazing plan, and not really have to look anywhere else for those other services that they might need to do kind of in today's world.
I love it. I love that, giving people a warm place that's welcoming, but then they could settle in as their forever home instead of just using it as an entry point, would be really great impact on the industry, I think. And not just on the industry, but when you have that right place, that's going to make a big impact on consumers as well. So I have certainty by the conversations I've had with you that you'll be able to reach that. I don't know about these two guys though. What are you guys shooting for? Nick?
That's so interesting because if you asked me 10 years ago what I wanted,
you can't say anything about rock and roll or guitars either.
Well, you know what you touched on, I'll do this real quick. You touched on where do financial services rank on that list. And it's actually medical doctors have the highest suicide rates from the list I saw, then dentists, then police, then veterinarian, then financial services.
I wanted stress, not suicide rates. Too dark, but okay, fine. We'll go with suicide.
Hey,
we'll just pretend it's the same thing.
Me, I'm an AI algorithm. This question is weird. Don't ask me something.
We'll blame it on ChatGPT. Your fault, MLMs. ChatGPT's fault. It went straight to the darkest place. Okay, so where do financial advisors lie? So give me the top three and then give me financial advisors.
Well, I said medical doctors, dentists, police. Financial advisors are 5, and then real estate 6.
Wow, didn't see those coming. Real estate.
Yeah. So anyways, where would I want to be in 10 years from now? I see it as, I don't know if I would want to be in as much of a growing of the practice mode. I would rather be more as an advocate, more maybe keynote speaking, maybe more podcasting like this, maybe more industry changing type activities, and focusing on developing those new up and comers into this space. I'd like to advocate more for the industry, like what we've been talking about a lot on this podcast, because I think that what we touched on is the journey that got me here is not a journey that I would want anybody to have to go through. There were so many psychological pulls, so much stress, so much inconsistencies of income, so many people looking to take the food off your plate before you even grabbed your fork, that I think we need to do a better job as a community. And the stripes that we've all earned from being in the industry as long as we have been, that stuff can't be bought or taught. We just had to earn it and learn it. And so I'd like to do more in that space.
And what's that price point look like to get you as a speaker in 10 years as that industry leading speaker at events?
Price point? Like what am I going to charge?
Yeah, what's the charge?
What's the charge?
Including
Jeez, I
inflation
don't
and
know.
everything else up to that point.
You know what? I'm going to do my best to
today's
become.
money, actually. Tell us in today's money. Make it easy to understand. How much?
I'll do my best to be independently wealthy from other ventures, and then I can do it as a pro bono charitable.
Give me a price tag. Give me a price tag. Do the t-shirt crown necklace thing that the MLM is like. So how much, what's the price point charge? What's your goal price point in 10 years for a speaking event for 45 minutes?
45 minutes. I would say I'm going to charge as much as I can, and then I'll donate it back to a good cause.
Oh, the politician's answer.
There you
All right, Simon, we're over to you.
go.
Where's your epitome look like in 10 years?
You know what? Similar to Nick, I think out of the growth phase, more in the maintenance phase. But one thing that coming from the last company we all kind of did a little stint at, I think I really found that I enjoyed the mentorship aspect of it. And similar to Grace, I think, yeah, just having a few guys to kind of help and mentor and kind of bring them up the industry, right? And I think that as I meet a lot of agents, they don't even understand what they can be or what they can actually achieve in this industry. And I think that's something that, again, similar to Nick, it's, I think, being an advocate for that side, like, hey, you know what, get your CFP. Hey, you know what, learn about taxation, learn about insurance, learn about investments. You want to do this holistic approach. Don't be a sales guy, right? Or just a sales guy. You want to, at the end of the day, doing what's best for your client, doesn't mean just being able to sell one specific product. I think one of our old friends, Sheldon, he'd always say, if you're building a house, right, and you ask a plumber what to do, the plumber's going to tell you to install a sink in every freaking room, right? And I know
a plumber like that.
Yeah, and I think that I really equate that to the industry that we're in, right? Where if you ask an insurance agent what the best solution for a client specific problem is, every insurance agent is going to say it's insurance. And if you ask an investment advisor, he's going to say investments. And I think that, I like Grace's answer about having a more holistic approach. And that really resonates with me. And I think we really need to advocate more for that in our industry, and just kind of teach these, the newer advisors coming in that, you don't have to be just one thing. Just where you start doesn't mean it's going to be where you end up. And no, I think that's where I really want to be, is in, running my practice, but being a little bit more of a mentorship role as well. So.
Well, good. Well, I'm going to end on this note. Number one, to you guys, I love that you guys are all talking about advocating, mentoring, and you all made different points about how, and even more, I'm thinking about it more than I realized. And I wish I had have known a lot more in this in my career, of the different opportunities, because even I spent a decade in a bank, and I thought, okay, there's like the private wealth division, there's mortgage advisor, and that's kind of the scope, or like regular banker, which, so I like you guys are all talking about. I like that you're going to be mentoring the future of our finance. It gives me a lot of hope, makes me feel kind of warm inside. At the same time, 10 years goes by, you guys are going to be blamed. You have now proclaimed, the three of you, that you guys are going to be mentoring the next generation. So if they don't look good, it's on you. We're going to look back at this 10 years, and I'm going to leave a quick message for the MLM leaders, because you have a lot of people under you, and I'm going to speak directly to you that are the MLM leaders. I don't know which one of you this applies to. You guys will know yourself if you have any self-awareness whatsoever, which not everybody always has. We need to start a new way for MLMs. If you're going to do the MLM model, do it, but you need to rethink it in a new way. You need to make sure that people are giving holistic advice in this new era that the young people are going to demand. And there's not always, because I know this is such a huge part of some MLMs cultures, there's not always a mutiny at hand. If somebody farted 3 blocks down the street, that doesn't mean they're coming to take your book of business and all of your people underneath, and you start freaking out and letting your mind run wild, and then become unhinged and are detached from reality. It doesn't have to be a constant mutiny. I know that happens in a lot of businesses, but it's a really deep psychology in some MLMs, and certainly within the financial industry. So let's take that sobriety, the humility to look in the mirror, even to have the way that Nick beautifully explained, having that personal accountability. Money is very helpful, but when we focus on the money, which does happen at the top of some of these MLMs, we don't live the life and become the people we want to become. We have to focus on doing something awesome with awesome people like the people I have on this call that really care about people. And I want quickly to shout out Grace. You are taking clients. What does your ideal client look like real quick? I want Simon and Nick to quickly tout their own brands as well. They are sponsors of the podcast as well with their wealth management brands, but we're not afraid to talk about and promote the people that come on as well, where we think that I have a huge amount. I personally would send my grandmother to you, Grace. Tell us quickly what type of clients you're looking to deal with and how they can reach out to you. And I'll ask Simon and Nick to do the same.
Thanks, Sheldon. I guess really quickly, my ideal client, or I feel the most connection with right now, is young starting families, people who are recently married, thinking about buying a home, thinking about having children, and who are feeling kind of lost with our system. How am I going to get there with interest rates? How am I going to get there with rent being so high and all of these things that are against us right now? So people, in their 30s who are really looking to get going with their plan and who have maybe struggled in the past.
Awesome. And then what's the best way to reach you? Where can they Google you? Can they LinkedIn you? Do they email you? How do they smoke signal?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You can also email me at Grace@John's Life and Legacy Insurance Solutions. But the quickest way is definitely on LinkedIn. You can view my profile, see all of my accreditations, and shoot me a quick message. I'll quickly reply to you.
Awesome. And Nick and Simon, I know you guys are just looking for straight billionaires. How do the billionaires reach you? What are you looking for, and how can they reach you?
You know what? We have two different angles. So maybe I'll talk about FinMix since we just chatted about it.
Okay, good. Nick can talk about the other side,
and then Nick can talk about our financial planning practice. Yeah, FinMix is we came up with an idea about combining our love of art, comics, and finances together. And we've created a company where we do digital marketing, where we create visually appealing financial infographics, carousels, and different types of visual promotional materials to basically help find other financial advisors promote their business. Essentially, we'll explain complex concepts and different types of financial planning, insurance, investment concepts that will help the different financial advisors out there, help them generate business, but more importantly, establish themselves as subject matter experts in their area and help them get clients. And that's and you can just reach me or Nick basically on LinkedIn, and it's probably the fastest way to get to us, actually.
Beautiful. And Nick, on the wealth side, what are you guys doing? Who are you looking for?
Yeah, on the wealth side, I mean, Simon and I have
and planning side. Sorry, and planning side.
And planning side, yeah, like Simon and I, we do have practices that are existent already, and we've got clientele that we're working on there, and generally it's more on a servicing them and growing that out and working with those families. But what we do a lot of is we're in the financial planning side, around the financial planning table. So we work with a lot of insurance only advisors. We work a lot with exempt market advisors, investment advisors, people that are really strong in their niche, but they need somebody at the table that can build the holistic structure and do that holistic financial plan and help with super complex arrangements of tax optimizing, efficiencies, making sure that they don't lose opportunity or have opportunity cost in their overall plan. So it's not always about, do I have enough money to survive? It's about, are we being efficient and working our way to the best we can? And we have a lot of conversations around estate planning, because at the end of the day, when we leave this earth, our money is going to go one of three places: either our family, a local charity, or our church, or the CRA. And most people don't want it to go to number three, even if you are financially well. So we work with everybody coast to coast. We do fee-based financial planning. We are not there to push or promote any type of product. We're there as an agnostic financial planner to help the client make good decisions.
Good. Well, I can't thank you guys enough for joining the podcast permanently, and Simon, having the camera on for us. And Grace, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Love the warmth that you're going to bring into the industry, and I'll be over with some sweet potato biscuits very soon.
Thanks so much, Sheldon.